The first light of dawn filters through the small, diamond-paned windows of the old Tudor cottage, casting soft golden hues on the uneven stone floor. The thick wooden beams above creak ever so slightly as the house settles into another quiet day, and the cool morning air carries with it the faint scent of yesterday's wood smoke and dried lavender hanging from the rafters. In the heart of the home, the kitchen, the great hearth lies cold for now, its ashes tucked neatly into the corners of the firebox. A tall iron kettle hangs silently from the swinging arm, still from the night before, waiting for the flames that will soon begin another day of simmering, stewing, and warming. Elspeth, the cook of the house, wakes with the first sounds of birdsong just beyond the ivy-covered windows. She is no longer young, her hands shaped by years of kneading, chopping, and stirring, but there's a calm grace in the way she rises from her straw mattress and wraps a woolen shawl around her shoulders. Her leather shoes make the softest sound as she pads down the wooden staircase to begin the morning ritual. The kitchen is still, peaceful in its slumber, and Elspeth moves through it like a familiar ghost. She opens the heavy wooden shutters, letting in the shy morning light. The air smells of the countryside, damp earth, early dew, and distant smoke from the thatch-roofed chimneys nearby. She kneels by the hearth and arranges the kindling carefully, small twigs collected the day before, some dried moss, and a handful of curled birch bark. From a small, tin box, she pulls flint and steel, striking them rhythmically until a tiny orange flame begins to dance. Slowly, carefully, she feeds the flame with larger pieces of wood until the fire begins to crackle and glow, spreading warmth through the cold stone room. The gentle sound of the fire is soothing, like a lullaby from the past. Shadows flicker along the walls. Soft silhouettes of dried herbs, hanging ladles, and copper pans that catch the light like ancient mirrors. Everything in the room feels settled, rooted in its place, like it has waited all night for this moment to return to life. Elspeth reaches for the kettle, fills it from the ceramic jug by the sink, and sets it back above the fire to heat. The water will be for tea, nothing fancy, just dried mint and lemon balm gathered from the garden. The herbs rest now in a small wooden box near the shelf, each labeled with neat cursive on parchment tags: chamomile, thyme, nettle, and rose. While the water warms, she takes a soft cloth and gently wipes down the wooden table, worn smooth from years of use. This table has seen bread kneaded, vegetables chopped, pies rolled, and bowls of porridge served with tender care. It is more than just wood, it is a companion in her daily rhythm. From a larder tucked behind the kitchen wall, she retrieves the first ingredients for the day's meal. A few root vegetables stored in straw, a piece of salted pork wrapped in cloth, and a. From a larder tucked behind the kitchen wall, she retrieves the first ingredients for the day's meal, a few root vegetables stored in straw, a piece of salted pork wrapped in cloth, and a small crock of yesterday's butter. Everything smells earthy and real, like the land it came from and the hands that prepared it. The kettle begins to hum, not quite a whistle, just a soft song of heat and time. Elspeth pours the hot water into a clay cup over the herbs, watching the steam rise slowly like morning mist over a field. She cradles the cup in her hands, warming her fingers, breathing in the soft, minty fragrance. There is no rush here, only time unfolding like parchment, quietly and gently. She sips, letting the warmth fill her belly, and watches the fire glow brighter, turning the kitchen into a place of life once more. A pot of porridge will soon bubble over the flames, and the scent of oats and honey will mingle with the wood smoke. Perhaps a fresh loaf will be baked later, or a meat pie tucked neatly into the stone oven near the hearth. But for now, there is only stillness, the simple act of morning tea, and the kitchen waking slowly, as all kitchens should. Outside, the cockerel crows in the distant yard, and somewhere, the stable boy shuffles past with an armful of hay. But inside, in the embrace of thick stone walls and low oak beams, time stretches like a cat in the sun, unhurried, soft, and quietly sacred. The fire never wakes in haste. Even in a Tudor kitchen where time is measured by sun and shadow, where meals mark the day like clockwork, the hearth still rises slowly, as if remembering its own purpose before fully giving into flame. This morning, the fire has begun its gentle ascent. The first embers whisper and shift in their cradle of ash, while tiny fingers of flame climb patiently up the split logs. Their light dances softly along the blackened stone, casting gold onto the soot-streaked iron tools hanging nearby. Elspeth watches as the hearth begins to breathe again. She tends it as one would a sleeping infant, quiet, with a certain reverence. There's no impatience, no clattering of iron, no sharp movement. She adjusts the log pile, gently tilting one toward the center. She adds a sliver of dry dew, not for its heat, but for its smell, a faint sweetness that mingles with the earthy scent of oak. This is the part no one else sees. Before the clatter of spoons, before the smell of roasting and stewing, before orders are barked or errands begin, this quiet. This sacred tending of flame. In Tudor times, the hearth was not merely a place for cooking. It was the soul of the home. Without it, the house felt hollow. Cold. Still. In winter, when the nights stretched long and the winds rattled the shutters, the hearth was life itself. Children slept beside it. Old men whispered tales into its glow. Women stitched by candlelight while the fire crackled a lullaby. Every ember held a memory. Elspeth, like all cooks trained in such a house, knows this. The fire must not be simply lit, it must be coaxed, trusted, given space to waken. There are secrets in the hearth, passed down from one kitchen to the next. She remembers her teacher, Mistress Alderney, a woman with hair white as flour and a voice like smoke. She used to say, "The fire speaks, if you learn to listen." At first, Elspeth thought it foolish. But now, years later, she understands. She listens now. To the faint creak of the iron crane swinging into place. To the crackle of sap boiling out of a stubborn branch. To the tiny sigh of steam from yesterday's pot, still warm on its bottom edge. From a narrow shelf above the mantel, she pulls a small pot of rendered lard. With a wooden spoon, she dabs a little into the pan resting above the flames. The fat begins to melt slowly, glistening as it softens, spreading its rich scent into the air. It is the first real aroma of the day. A signal that cooking has begun. The fire hisses softly as the heat intensifies. Not too much, not too soon. If the flames grow too wild, the food will burn, the pans will warp, and the balance of the kitchen will be lost. So she adjusts a damper stone near the edge of the hearth, letting in a breath of cool air to tame the blaze. Behind her, the kitchen stretches into a cozy sprawl of time-worn furniture and purpose-built nooks. A bench by the side wall holds woven baskets filled with dried peas, root vegetables, and aging apples. A carved oak cupboard stores ceramic jugs, cloth-wrapped parcels of flour and barley, and rows of tin containers with wax-sealed lids. Each container holds something precious. Dried mushrooms gathered in the last damp autumn. Preserved lemon peels from a visiting merchant. A tin of saffron, almost empty, saved for feast days. And tucked away in a linen pouch, nutmeg, so rare and fragrant it's treated like gold. The fire grows stronger now, steady in its rhythm. Its glow reflects in Elspeth's eyes as she prepares the morning gruel, just oats, water, a touch of salt, and the end of a dried apple diced finely with her smallest knife. She pours the mixture into a round-bottomed pot and suspends it above the flame. The sound of water meeting heat is soft and satisfying. Soon, it will thicken and bubble, sending ribbons of steam curling upward toward the rafters. She stirs slowly, rhythmically. Around her, the kitchen settles into its early hum. A pigeon coos near the window ledge. The rafters creak as the sun climbs. The scent of cooking grains mingles with wood smoke and warm iron. As she stirs, Elspeth hums under her breath, a tune without words, passed down from kitchen to kitchen. It sounds like rosemary, and warm milk, and open shutters on a spring morning. It is the language of the Tudor hearth. Quiet, eternal, and patient. Once the gruel thickens, she spoons it into a wooden bowl and places it on the wide windowsill to cool. No one has arrived yet for breakfast. The rest of the household still lingers between sleep and day. But the cook is always first, always waiting. She wipes her hands on her apron and returns to the hearth, taking a moment to watch the fire now that it has fully woken. It glows with confidence, no longer timid, but not roaring either. It knows its role, constant, silent, kind. In the Tudor world, there were no knobs to turn, no timers or gauges. There was only intuition, and flame, and time. The fire taught patience. It demanded awareness. It offered no second chances if left untended. And so, each morning, before the house stirs and the first slice of bread meets the spit or the stew pot is hung, the cook must perform this ritual, waking the fire. Because cooking in a Tudor kitchen is not just a task. It is a rhythm. A devotion. A quiet magic. And it all begins with this: a woman, a hearth, a flame, and the gentle breath of morning. In the center of the Tudor kitchen stands a long, sturdy wooden table. Its oak planks are thick and broad, darkened by time, polished smooth not by wax, but by the touch of countless hands, by kneading, chopping, wiping, and working. It is not ornate. There are no carvings, no flourishes, just utility, age, and presence. This table has stood quietly through seasons, births, deaths, and decades of meals. Elspeth stands before it now, her hand resting gently upon the wood. She can feel the faint dips and scars in its surface, each one a quiet record. Here, the soft indentation from a kneading bowl that sat every morning. There, a faint burn mark from a pot laid too hastily in youth. And over there, a notch she herself made, many years ago, when her knife slipped while peeling an onion in haste. The table remembers what people forget. It remembers the laughter of the scullery maid who danced while drying herbs. It remembers the trembling hand of the steward who spilled wine when the master fell ill. It remembers the first apple pie Elspeth ever baked in this kitchen, so many years ago, and how she nearly cried when the crust burned. The table has no voice, but if it did, it would speak in sighs and whispers, in the creak of wood as weight is placed upon it, and in the hush of cloth drawn across its grain. Today, the table will host a loaf. Elspeth lifts the cloth she laid earlier, revealing the risen dough beneath. It has swelled with warmth, soft and ready, its skin dusted with flour, its center light and airy. She presses a finger into its side, gently, and the dough yields, then rises again slowly, like breath returning to a sleeping body. She sprinkles a fresh layer of flour across the table's surface, the pale dust catching in the grooves and lines of the old wood. Then she turns the dough onto it and begins to knead. Not with force, but with care. Her palms roll it forward, her fingers fold it back. Over and over, like tides shaping a shore. The table bears her movements with quiet dignity. It does not groan or shift. It simply receives. This has always been its role, to support, to hold, to serve. In the corner of the room, the first sliver of sun has climbed onto the floor. Light moves slowly across the flagstones, crawling toward the table's legs. Dust motes float like stars in still air. Outside, the chickens scratch in the yard, and a soft wind rattles the ivy along the stone wall. As Elspeth kneads, her mind wanders. She remembers her own mother's table, smaller, thinner, with legs that wobbled. But it was where she first learned to peel a turnip, to mash berries for ink, to wipe away flour with the corner of her sleeve. Tables, she thinks, are the quiet mothers of kitchens. This one has seen gatherings. It has held trays of roasted game, bowls of pottage, trenchers stacked high with bread. It has been a place of joy and mourning alike. On it, bannocks were baked to celebrate births, and quiet bowls of broth served in times of loss. It is more than furniture. It is memory in wood. Elspeth finishes kneading and shapes the loaf into a neat round. She places it in a shallow clay pan and dusts the top with flour. A knife slices a careful cross atop the dough, not just to help it bake evenly, but as tradition. The sign of the cross, long held by country cooks, believed to bless the bread and keep away misfortune. She sets the loaf aside, near the hearth, where the gentle heat of the fire will help it rise once more before baking. Then she returns to the table to clear the space. From a small drawer beneath the tabletop, she draws a cloth and wipes the surface slowly, lovingly, catching stray flour and crumbs. She pauses over a stain in the wood, a dark, old one, perhaps from blackberry juice or spilled wine from a feast years ago. She does not scrub it out. Some marks are meant to remain. Above the table, a row of dried herbs hangs from a beam. Sage, thyme, marjoram, and bay. Their leaves are curled and papery, their scent still strong in the warm air. They cast faint shadows on the table below, soft and lacy. To one side of the table, a simple wooden bench sits under the window. It, too, is worn, its edges rubbed smooth by years of skirts and aprons. Sometimes Elspeth sits here to peel apples. Sometimes the stable boy comes in to eat his lunch in silence. And sometimes, when the day ends and the fire has died to embers, she simply sits and rests, hands folded, eyes closed, listening to the quiet. The table sees it all. It sees the rhythm of the day, the morning tea, the midday roast, the preparation for supper. It sees the cook's hands when they are young and quick, and when they are old and careful. It sees the changing seasons through the window, the golden light of autumn, the pale chill of winter, the green promise of spring. It hears the laughter of children sneaking a heel of bread. The whisper of prayers said softly before a meal. The clink of mugs and the scrape of knives. The soft thud of dough meeting wood. There is no ceremony here. No applause, no poetry. Only the simple truth of a life built from meals and mornings, from work and warmth. As the loaf begins its second rise, Elspeth pours herself a second cup of tea and sits on the bench beside the table. Her bones are a little sore this morning, but there is satisfaction in the ache. The fire glows, the herbs sway gently overhead, and the table, faithful, strong, silent, waits for whatever task comes next. For it has always waited. And it always will. The loaf rests beneath a cloth, nestled in the gentle warmth near the hearth, rising again in silence. Outside, the world is still muted. The Tudor morning unfolds slowly, as if wrapped in wool, a thin mist lingering in the air, a soft chorus of birdsong weaving through the trees. Sunlight filters in cautiously, slipping through the small panes of the kitchen windows in narrow slants. Inside, the warmth of the fire deepens the hush, and the smell of yeast, flour, and hearth smoke begins to mingle in the quiet air. Elspeth stands at the edge of the hearth, arms folded loosely, watching the firelight flicker across the rising dough. Bread, she knows, cannot be rushed. It is a living thing. It breathes, it rests, it responds to touch, to temperature, to the quiet intentions of the baker. This particular loaf is simple, just flour, water, salt, and a bit of old ale, fermented to lend it strength. Yet, within its soft dome lies a miracle of patience and transformation. What was dry and lifeless only hours ago now pulses with warmth, its surface puffing ever so slightly under the linen cloth. In the Tudor kitchen, bread is sacred. It is not merely food, it is a symbol of care, of providence, of daily labor made meaningful. In a household such as this, no day passes without bread. There are coarse rye loaves for the servants, sweetened bannocks on feast days, and finely sifted white bread for the Lord's table, baked with flour so carefully milled it feels like silk in the hand. But this morning, Elspeth bakes for the household, not for a banquet or guest, but for those who tend the stables, gather the eggs, mend the fences, and bring in the herbs. It is a loaf for sharing, and its simplicity is its comfort. She moves to the side of the kitchen where the peel rests, the long-handled wooden paddle used for placing loaves in the oven. Beside it is the clay baking dome, nestled into the masonry of the hearth, its interior warmed earlier by flame and now glowing faintly from stored heat. She opens its small door and feels inside. The stones radiate with perfect steadiness, neither too hot nor too cool. Bread needs balance, just like fire. She lifts the cloth from the bowl. The dough has risen beautifully, round and domed, its surface speckled with tiny air bubbles beneath a dusting of flour. It smells faintly of the ale, of warmth, and of potential. With practiced hands, she transfers the loaf onto the peel. The dough gives slightly, like a pillow touched in sleep. A swift motion, delicate and sure, and the loaf slides into the oven with barely a sound. She closes the little door and steps back, exhaling slowly. Now, there is nothing to do but wait. While the bread bakes, the kitchen moves on. The fire is fed again, one log only, to keep the warmth steady but not fierce. The pot of leftover oats from earlier is stirred and set aside for the hens. A jug of milk is brought in from the cool cellar below, its clay surface damp with condensation. On the side shelf, a collection of small crocks sits waiting, each holding something preserved from a different season. Damson jam, spiced apple butter, pickled onions, and salted greens. Elspeth opens one, the lid sealed with beeswax, and smiles at the sharp scent of vinegar and bay. These, she knows, will pair well with the bread when it is done. There is a joy in such pairings, in turning humble ingredients into quiet moments of pleasure. The scent of baking begins to rise. It starts faint, almost indistinct, like the memory of something once warm. Then it strengthens, blooming through the air in waves, golden crust, yeasty middle, the faint tang of the ale. It is a scent that cannot be mistaken. It speaks of safety, of morning, of home. Bread does not sing aloud when it bakes, but it announces itself in scent and in silence. It gathers the household like a bell-tolling comfort. Even now, beyond the thick oak door, Elspeth hears the slow creak of floorboards upstairs. Someone waking, stirred by the promise of a meal. She moves to the oven, opens the door carefully, and leans close. The crust is beginning to turn, no longer pale, but touched with brown. She lifts the loaf gently, tapping its underside with 2 fingers. The sound is hollow, round, perfect. It is done. She sets it on the table atop a cloth and lets it rest. The crust crackles faintly as it cools, the sound so delicate it might be mistaken for the rustle of leaves in a warm breeze. Elspeth does not slice it right away. That is another secret of bread, it must rest, just a little, before it is cut. Its insides are still soft and steaming, still settling into their final texture. She pours another cup of tea and sits on the bench by the window, the scent of fresh bread filling every breath she takes. In the distance, a child's laugh echoes faintly in the courtyard. A stable door closes with a wooden thud. The rooster crows again, less urgently now. The day is unfolding. She picks up a small pot of butter, churned the day before, and sets it beside the bread. A knife rests nearby, its handle worn smooth. Soon, others will come, the steward, the kitchen boy, perhaps even the housemaid, her apron streaked with the dust of the attic. They will each take a piece, thick or thin, spread with butter or jam, eaten standing or seated by the fire. There will be no ceremony, no speeches. Only bread. And in that simple act, in the warmth of crust, the softness of crumb, the melting of butter, there will be something holy. Because in the Tudor kitchen, the making of bread is more than a task. It is a rhythm older than memory. A soft, steady drumbeat that has pulsed through time itself. And as the sun climbs gently higher, the scent of the loaf drifting through the stone walls, Elspeth closes her eyes for a moment and breathes it in fully. Bread has risen in the dawn. And so has the day. The sun, now climbing gently above the orchard trees, filters through the kitchen window and touches the far wall of the room, a space lovingly referred to as the herb wall. It isn't grand. Not tall or wide. Just a stretch of plastered stone lined with wooden pegs and narrow shelves. Yet here, in this small alcove beneath a beam darkened by decades of rising steam, hangs a living archive of fragrance, medicine, and flavor. Sprigs of rosemary dangle beside long tendrils of thyme, their tiny leaves curled inward from drying. Bundles of marjoram, lavender, and bay are tied neatly with twine, hanging upside down in graceful rows like the quiet bells of an old cathedral. The soft green and dusky gray colors blend into a harmony that pleases the eye as much as the nose. Elspeth steps softly toward the wall, mug of tea in hand, the warmth still lingering in her palms. Her fingers reach out to brush the soft tips of sage leaves, velvety and cool. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply. Each herb has its story. She remembers gathering them in the summer months, barefoot in the garden at dawn, the dew wetting the hem of her skirts. Some were clipped carefully with shears. Others plucked gently by hand, with a whispered word of thanks to the plant, as her mother once taught her. In the Tudor kitchen, herbs are not just garnish or seasoning, they are the lifeblood of every stew, the healing salve in every cupboard, the charm hung above the cradle or tucked into a traveler's coat. She turns toward the narrow shelf tucked just beneath the drying pegs. Here sit her treasured boxes, small wooden compartments, each lined with linen, labeled in fading ink. Chamomile, yarrow, sweet Sicily, rue, fennel, lovage. She runs her finger over each label as if greeting old friends. Some herbs, she knows, carry bold voices. Rosemary, sharp and piney, used for lamb or to steep in warm oil for aching joints. Thyme, earthy and warm, perfect for stews and broths. Lavender, delicate and floral, dried and crushed into linen drawers, or steeped in honeyed tea to calm restless sleep. Others are more subtle, reserved, lemon balm, soft and lemon-scented, beloved for soothing nerves. Mugwort, bitter but mysterious, rumored in old tales to stir dreams and ward off illness. Hyssop, used with discretion, for both cleansing the soul and steeping into tonics. Elspeth lifts a bundle of dried mint and crushes a few leaves gently between her fingers. The scent rises, bright and green, with the sting of morning air. She places the leaves into a small mortar and reaches for her pestle, grinding them slowly, the rhythmic motion like the beating of a soft drum. The crushed mint will be used for the noon meal, stirred into a cooling sauce to accompany the salted pork left from the night before. Nothing is wasted here, every meal is a continuation of the last, a story told in ingredients and timing. As she grinds, the sounds of the kitchen return, the low crackle of the fire, the creak of wood as the house warms, and outside, the distant clop of hooves in the muddy road. The world is waking fully now, but inside this corner of the kitchen, there remains a sense of hush, a sanctuary of scent and silence. Above the herbs, a narrow window lets in a stream of light. The glass, slightly rippled, bends the sun into soft shapes across the jars. Dust motes shimmer in the beams, dancing above the heads of rosemary and sage as if the plants themselves were sighing in the warmth. Elspeth smiles. She reaches for her herb ledger, a slim book bound in rough leather and stuffed with loose papers. Its pages are mottled with stains and pressed leaves, scrawled notes in multiple hands. Some entries date back to her predecessor, Mistress Alderney. Others are in Elspeth's own careful script, written at night by candlelight after observing which herbs healed a cut or eased a cough. She flips to a page marked with a dried sprig of elderflower. For fever, it reads, steep with yarrow and peppermint. Administer warm, beneath a wool blanket. Whisper a prayer to Saint Wulfhild. Elspeth traces the words with her fingertip. How many remedies had begun here, in this quiet corner beneath the beams? Not just for illness, either. There were herbs for memory, rosemary and sage. Herbs for sorrow, chamomile, gently steeped with rose. And herbs for protection, wormwood, lavender, and mugwort, bound in a cloth sachet and placed above the lintel. She recalls the time she crafted a bouquet for a frightened kitchen maid, a bundle of thyme and marjoram tied with blue ribbon, slipped into the girl's apron pocket. To guard your steps, Elspeth whispered then. And calm your fears. The girl smiled for the first time in weeks. In the Tudor world, where medicine was scarce and doctors rarer still, the kitchen was more than a place for food. It was the first line of healing. The cook was both nourisher and healer, keeper of flavor and protector of wellness. Elspeth's gaze lingers on one final bundle, tied with red string. Angelica. Strong, sweet, and sharp. Used for colds, digestion, and, some whispered, protection from dark spirits. She rarely uses it. Only when the wind howls too loud, or the dogs bark without cause, or the air feels thin. On those nights, she hangs a bit above the door, just in case. Because kitchens, for all their comfort, are not without mystery. Fires flicker when no draft is felt. Spoons drop without cause. Shadows move just beyond the light. And in a house this old, such things are not feared, but noted, and gently respected. She finishes grinding the mint and pours it into a little glazed bowl. She will mix it with vinegar, honey, and a touch of cinnamon. A sauce for the meal. But also, in a way, a gift from the garden, preserved by time and hand. The herb wall watches quietly as she works, as it always has. It has seen all seasons, lush green in summer, sparse and shivering in winter. It has cradled remedies and secrets, love potions and simple teas. It has heard the whispers of women who knew plants like others know prayer. And now, as the morning sun bathes the herbs in light, Elspeth returns her tools, ties back the bundles, and steps away. The herbs hang in silence. But if one listens closely, they do speak. In rustles. In scent. In the way they hold the knowledge of many hands and many kitchens. In the Tudor kitchen, the herb wall is more than a decoration. It is a whispering library. A sacred place. A reminder that nature, when honored, will always offer its quiet help. The fire in the hearth burns steadily now, sending soft golden light across the stone floor. Shadows stretch lazily toward the far corners of the Tudor kitchen, where old tools rest quietly, waiting their turn. Morning has slipped into a gentle midday hush, and Elspeth, apron tied and hands freshly dried, moves toward the wall where the pots hang like a gallery of well-used art. The copper pots catch the firelight first. Their bellies are warm with golden glints, dulled only slightly by the years of use. Some are polished more than others, the smaller saucepot near the bottom gleams brightest, a gift from the head housekeeper long ago. Others bear dents and darkened edges, signs of a life spent over the flames. Next to them, iron pans hang heavier. Their black surfaces are seasoned with history, layers of oil, flame, and time creating a surface that no scrub or soap should ever touch. They are passed down, not simply owned. A good iron pan, it said, can outlast 3 cooks and still ask for more. Elspeth lifts one of the iron pans from its hook. The weight settles in her wrist like a handshake from an old friend. She tests the feel of it, balances it for a moment, and smiles. This one belonged to her mother. She remembers the first time she saw it used, flattened oatcakes cooked over a fire in a much smaller hearth than this. Her mother moved with calm confidence, flipping each round with the back of a wooden spoon. The scent of browning oats and butter lingers even now in Elspeth's memory. She sets the pan down gently upon the hearthstone to warm. There is something sacred about the way pans age in a Tudor kitchen. They are never discarded casually. A broken handle can be mended. A dented rim becomes part of its charm. These are not items of passing utility. They are instruments of nourishment, shaped by fire and by memory. Next, she turns to the pot rack. A sturdy beam running above the prep table, where ladles, skimmers, and long-handled spoons hang from iron hooks. Some are carved from wood, others shaped from pewter. Each one bears fingerprints, burn marks, and softened edges. Her favorite ladle is the one with the chipped rim and worn handle. It fits her grip perfectly. Beneath the rack sits the bread trencher, stained by flour and oil, and next to it the long-handled peel used for reaching into the deep bread oven built into the wall. These tools may not shine like the pots, but they carry equal importance. Today, she will prepare a thick stew, a midday meal meant to comfort and sustain. She begins by selecting the larger of the copper pots, wiping the inside with a clean cloth and filling it with well water drawn earlier from the outdoor well. The pot sings faintly as the water meets its base, a soft note of metal and motion. She places it carefully on the iron trivet above the coals, adding dried peas, diced onion, a handful of barley, and slices of smoked root vegetables. The scent rises slowly, earthy and warm. Into the pan, she adds a dollop of lard and places it over the smaller side of the hearth. She peels an apple, one of the last from autumn's store, and slices it thin. It will caramelize gently in the iron, mingling with a pinch of cinnamon and clove. A side for the stew, or perhaps a simple treat to offer the apprentice when he returns from chopping kindling. As the kitchen fills with scent, she begins to clean the tools used earlier. Not with soap, but with a damp cloth and coarse salt rubbed gently into the iron and wood. The cleaning itself is rhythmic, back and forth, circular, deliberate. She hums softly, the same tune her grandmother once sang while washing her own pans in a different kitchen, long ago. From the corner of the room, the butter churn stands silent. Elspeth gives it a glance, then a small smile. Tomorrow, she thinks. Today is for pots and stew. She turns to the pot hooks again, lifting a long-handled fork used to test roasted meats, and next to it, a flesh slice, an oddly named but useful flat utensil for lifting stewed meats from hot broth. Each has a place, each a purpose, like characters in a quiet household play, performing without audience, without fanfare. In the Tudor world, kitchens were rarely romantic places. They were hot, smoky, full of noise and labor. But when seen through the gentle lens of quiet hours, like this moment, with stew bubbling, apples browning, and copper pots glowing, they become cathedrals of comfort. Elspeth stirs the pot again. The barley is softening. The scent has grown richer, smoke and sweetness, salt and thyme. She lowers the flame by shifting a log to the side, letting the heat linger gently rather than rise too high. It is a lesson learned over years: food does not respond to haste. It listens best to patience. She lifts the lid of the copper pot and leans in. Steam curls upward, fogging her vision slightly. She inhales the warmth, the melding of humble ingredients into something worthy of memory. Behind her, the pans still hang. The largest has not moved in years, it is too big for daily use. But it stays, because one day it will be needed again, and because the shape of its presence brings balance to the kitchen. Balance. That is what the Tudor cook learns most of all. Balance of heat and cold. Of spice and salt. Of sound and silence. Elspeth wipes her hands once more and sits by the fire. The spoon in her lap. The stew nearly done. Outside, birds chirp low in the hedgerows. A cart rolls past the distant gate. The day continues. But inside, in this warm circle of copper and iron, there is peace. The kind of peace that lives not in grand gestures or golden halls, but in the quiet simmering of a pot, the weight of a seasoned pan, and the memory of those who cooked before you. The copper glows. The pan cools. The stew is ready. And all is well in the Tudor kitchen. The day drifts softly toward late afternoon, and a gentle hush settles upon the Tudor kitchen. The morning bustle has passed, and the stew now rests in the warmth of the hearth. A new task begins, as ancient and beloved as any in this home, the baking of bread. Elspeth draws a breath, slow and steady, and moves toward the flour chest. It is made of oak, stained dark with years, its lid smoothed by countless hands. As she opens it, a faint dust of flour rises, soft as mist, curling upward before vanishing into the amber light of the room. Inside, the flour is cool and dry, sifted from last week's grind at the village mill. Coarse flecks of bran catch the eye. This is no refined white flour, but the hearty, honest kind that nourishes and grounds. She takes a large wooden scoop and pours it into a wide dough trough, carved from a single piece of ash wood. The hollow of it feels like a cradle, built not only to hold the dough but to shape it, to let it breathe and rise. A pinch of salt, a ladle of warm water from the hearth, and then comes the yeast, taken from a small pot of saved leaven, bubbling faintly on the shelf. This sour starter, handed down and kept alive through the weeks, connects today's loaf to all those baked before it. In this house, bread is never made from nothing. It is always built upon the memory of the last. Her hands sink gently into the flour. There is something meditative in the motion. The pressing, folding, turning. Her fingers glide through the mixture, coaxing it into a sticky, living thing. The dough is rough at first, but with patience, and the steady rhythm of kneading, it becomes smooth and warm, like skin beneath a sunbeam. Elspeth does not rush. She kneads slowly, in time with her breath. The room is quiet save for the faint squelch of dough against wood, and the soft creak of the table with each lean of her weight. She hums again, the tune older than memory. Her grandmother used to sing it while baking, and perhaps her mother before her. Songs have always lived in kitchens, drifting between shelves and hearthstones, folded into flour and carried in rising steam. Once the dough is ready, she shapes it into round loaves, plump and firm, and places them on a floured board to rise beneath a linen cloth. As they rest, she prepares the bread oven, a cavern of brick and stone built directly into the wall. It must be warmed carefully. She lays dried twigs and bark into the oven mouth, then adds a small bundle of split logs. With a flint and striker, she draws a few sparks, coaxing flame from ember. The fire begins small, glowing like a secret, then grows into a healthy flicker that licks at the stone walls. The bread oven holds heat differently from the hearth, it captures and stores warmth deep inside, releasing it slowly, evenly. Once the fire has done its work, the ashes will be swept out and the loaves slid in on a wooden peel, their round bellies resting on hot stone. Elspeth waits, watching the flames. Time feels different here, slow and sacred. She remembers her first bread, made in this very kitchen, under the careful eye of Mistress Adwin, the old cook who taught her everything. "You must treat bread like a guest," the mistress had said. "Invite it kindly. Let it rest. Never rush it away from the table." Now, Elspeth is the keeper of those lessons. She checks the dough, rising nicely now, soft and domed beneath the cloth. The surface shows signs of life, tiny bubbles forming, the breath of yeast and warmth doing their gentle work. She sweeps out the oven with a birch broom, careful not to leave cinders. The stone glows faintly inside, just right. She takes the peel, slides it beneath the first loaf, and carries it like a newborn toward the oven mouth. One by one, the loaves go in. The oven door is closed, and the waiting begins. There is a strange joy in this moment, this pause between labor and reward. Elspeth uses the time to clean the board, wipe down the trough, and refill the flour scoop for tomorrow. Every action is slow and circular, grounding the body, soothing the mind. In a corner of the kitchen sits the bread cupboard, its slatted door carved with vines and leaves. It holds the week's baked goods, wrapped in cloth and tucked neatly onto shelves. Inside it still sits the last slice of the previous loaf, crusty and dry, soon to be soaked for pottage or given to the dog. Nothing is wasted in a Tudor kitchen. The scent begins softly, sweet and toasty, curling from the oven seams. Elspeth closes her eyes. The aroma is like a lullaby, warm and whole. It fills the air with memories, of shared meals, of bustling feast days, of quiet mornings with bread and broth by the fire. When she opens the oven again, the loaves are golden. Their crusts are crisp, their tops slightly cracked, their smell enough to still the world. She taps one gently, hollow-sounding. Perfect. She lifts them out with the peel, resting them on the wooden cooling rack. Steam rises from the bread like breath from a sleeping child. She doesn't speak. There's no need. In the Tudor kitchen, the baking of bread is more than daily labor, it is the beating heart of the home. Every meal begins with it. Every comfort returns to it. Bread is sustenance and symbol, both humble and holy. Elspeth sets one loaf aside for the evening meal and wraps the rest in cloth. The warmth remains trapped within them, like a secret. She strokes the crust of the nearest one, then draws the linen over it, letting it rest. Outside, the light has turned amber. The day leans into evening. But within these walls, surrounded by the scent of fire and flour, by the quiet comfort of rising dough and seasoned stone, there is a stillness deeper than sleep. The bread has been made. The oven is cooling. And for now, all is well in the Tudor kitchen. The kitchen has quieted after the baking, its rhythm now slowed to a peaceful lull. Outside, the wind brushes against the thatched eaves, carrying the faint scent of meadow and earth. Inside, Elspeth lights a beeswax taper and sets it near the table, its flickering flame casting golden shadows across shelves lined with small wooden jars and bundles of dried leaves. This is the hour of herbs, gentle, fragrant, and mysterious. She moves slowly to the herb cabinet, a tall structure tucked in a corner of the kitchen. Its little doors creak open, revealing rows of tightly stoppered pots, tied bundles hanging from hooks, and bits of root and blossom kept in cloth pouches. Each one labeled with a faint, careful hand: wormwood, comfrey, borage, thyme, sage, elderflower, and more. Some are for healing. Some are for flavor. A few are for keeping spirits at peace. Elspeth reaches for marjoram, known not only for its warm, woodsy taste but also its power to ease sadness. She rubs the brittle leaves between her fingers, releasing their earthy scent into the air. It mingles with the lingering warmth of baked bread and the cool whisper of evening air slipping through the cracks in the stone wall. On a table near the hearth lies the herb board, where bunches are sorted and prepared. A pestle and mortar carved from river stone wait patiently, ready to crush dried fennel seeds or pound fresh parsley into green paste. The rhythm of grinding, slow and circular, brings a quiet clarity to the mind. Elspeth selects a bundle of lavender, its purple flowers dried to a dusky hue. She crumbles some into a small linen pouch and tucks it into the kitchen's corner shelf, where food is stored. Lavender wards off insects, but it also brings calm. The scent, sweet and mellow, makes her think of deep sleep and old lullabies sung by mothers long gone. Next, she gathers sage and rosemary, both hanging near the chimney for drying. The leaves rustle softly as she unties them. These herbs, with their sharp, cleansing scents, will flavor tomorrow's meat pie, but they will also be burned briefly on the hearth to purify the air. Such little rituals are passed down not as spells but as traditions, tiny acts of reverence toward the old ways, woven into daily chores. She recalls how her grandmother used to murmur, "A pinch for flavor, a pinch for strength, a pinch to keep the dark away." And so, a pinch of rosemary is dropped onto the hearth. A moment of quiet passes as the herb smolders and releases its crisp, green scent into the kitchen. It curls up like incense, touching the beams and corners, as if saying a soft hello to all that's been and all that's yet to come. She smiles. Behind her, near the wall, stands a wooden apothecary chest, with dozens of tiny drawers. Each one holds something different: dried rose hips, slippery elm, nettle, cloves, powdered mustard, or little pieces of cinnamon bark brought from far-off lands by traveling merchants. These rare treasures are stored with care, for they are precious. Tonight, Elspeth will prepare a restful tisane for the household, an herbal tea to bring ease to those who labor and dream. Into the mortar she places a spoonful of dried chamomile blossoms, soft and golden. A pinch of valerian root, earthy and strong. A scattering of linden flowers, delicate and pale. And, finally, a few petals of damask rose, for warmth and sweetness. She grinds them slowly, listening to the crackle and crunch. Each twist of the pestle releases more scent, and the air becomes rich with sleepy promise. When done, she spoons the blend into a small cloth bag, ties it with twine, and hangs it near the hearth to steep in warm water when the night draws closer. Then, she turns her attention to the spice shelf, higher up and more carefully guarded. Here lie the true luxuries: nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, brought from ports across the sea. So costly, so carefully used. Elspeth opens a small glass jar and inhales the scent of cinnamon, sweet, spicy, and deep. Just a shaving of it will go into tomorrow's pudding, its taste warm like the sun on an autumn afternoon. With these spices, the Tudor kitchen becomes not only a place of sustenance but one of quiet celebration. Every dish, every drink, is a story, a charm, a little gift of care wrapped in flavor. She lines up the herb bundles on the table and inspects each one. The mint has dried perfectly, its green still vivid. The angelica root, once pale and fresh, now carries a woody scent. She wraps the best bundles for storage, tying them with twine and placing them carefully in the cupboard. A few she leaves out, those that will be used soon, their colors still vibrant. The hearth crackles softly behind her. She moves slowly, reverently, for she knows this work is older than books and recipes. The wisdom of herbs was once shared by whispers, by songs sung over broth pots and secrets exchanged in quiet kitchens like this. There is no hurry here. No rush of metal or clock. Only breath and motion, the touch of hand to leaf, the quiet joy of preparing comfort for others. Outside, twilight settles into dusk. The light through the window is dusky blue, and the walls of the kitchen seem to draw closer, warmer, holding the scents and silence like a gentle cocoon. Elspeth pours hot water over the herb pouch in a clay pot and lets it steep. The steam rises in slow curls, fragrant and kind. She pours a cup, cradles it in her hands, and sits by the hearth. She takes a sip. The warmth travels down her throat, easing her breath. A calm settles deep in her belly, like a stone at the bottom of a still pond. The day is nearly done. And in the herb-scented hush of this Tudor kitchen, it feels as though time has slowed to a soft exhale. Just herbs, heat, and heart, a quiet potion for peace. The soft golden light of late afternoon filters into the Tudor kitchen, casting warm rays across the old oak floor. Elspeth stands quietly for a moment, listening. The house hums with hushed footsteps and distant voices, servants moving about, rooms being swept, linens being pressed. Today is no ordinary day. A feast is coming, and the kitchen must rise to meet it. The lord of the house is hosting guests. Nobles, landowners, and travelers of note will soon arrive. Their presence calls for more than daily bread, it demands roasts, sauces, and subtle delicacies only made on special occasions. Elspeth smooths her apron and ties her linen cap tighter. The hearth is already glowing. Today, it will blaze hot and long. The great oak prep table has been scrubbed clean. Upon it, bowls and basins await, neatly lined beside polished pewter platters. The smell of wood smoke, fresh rosemary, and lemon peel begins to fill the room. With quiet precision, Elspeth begins her work. First comes the meat. Large cuts of venison, a plump goose, and a haunch of boar. These have been hung and seasoned over days past, and now they rest on the carving board like sleeping giants. She calls in two younger kitchen boys, who lift the meats with care, bringing them to the spit. Roasting over an open fire is a task that takes time and attention. The goose is dressed with herbs, sage tucked beneath the skin, garlic pressed into the cavity, and rosemary tied with linen twine. The spit boy, small and nimble, begins turning the crank, his pace steady and practiced. The scent of crisping skin and melting fat begins to rise. Near the window, Elspeth arranges the vegetables. There are carrots, parsnips, onions, and turnips, each one peeled, sliced, and laid into a wide pan. She drizzles them with goose drippings and crushed pepper, then slides the pan into the brick oven's heart, where it will bake slowly, gathering flavor. The air begins to thicken with warmth and spice. At the far end of the kitchen, a younger girl crushes spices, cloves, nutmeg, and mace, using a heavy mortar. Elspeth walks over and inspects the mixture. It will be added to the wine sauce for the boar, thickened with breadcrumbs and stirred until rich and dark. On a second table, a bowl of dried fruits waits to be transformed. Prunes, currants, figs, and golden raisins, soaked in wine and perfumed with orange peel, will become a marchpane, a sweet almond confection molded into shapes of flowers and birds. Elspeth hums softly as she prepares the dough. Almonds are ground into a soft meal, mixed with sugar and rosewater. Her hands work slowly, folding the paste again and again, until it is pliable and smooth. She presses it into small wooden molds, each one shaped like a swallow, a tulip, a sun. These little delights will be arranged on a silver tray, glazed with honey and set near the end of the feast. A moment of wonder after so many rich dishes. Time passes gently. The meat crackles. The oven hums. The kitchen grows warm and fragrant, like the inside of a spice chest. Elspeth steps outside briefly to fetch fresh herbs from the garden. The sky is streaked with gold and blue, and swallows swoop low over the hedges. She gathers thyme, chervil, and sorrel, their green scent sharp in the cool air. Back in the kitchen, she slices them fine and adds them to a white sauce for the fish, trout caught fresh from the estate stream. She prepares a custard tart, its filling made of eggs, cream, saffron, and a touch of honey. It is poured into a pastry shell and baked until just set, golden on top, trembling in the center. As the dishes come together, the table begins to fill, platters of roast goose, jugs of thick gravy, trenchers of herb-studded bread, and pies filled with root vegetables and minced lamb. A salad of watercress, violets, and boiled eggs rests on a wooden bowl beside them. Beside that, a jar of preserved cherries in sweet wine glows like rubies. It is a feast both earthy and elegant. Elspeth pauses and surveys the room. The firelight dances on copper pans and the scent of baking lingers in every corner. A sense of pride swells in her chest, not boastful, just full of meaning. In this kitchen, with these hands, she has shaped something that will nourish not only bodies, but memory. She sets the last of the golden trenchers, slabs of day-old bread that will serve as plates, and places tiny sprigs of parsley atop the roasts. The final touch. Voices call from the hallway. The steward has come to collect the first course. Servants enter in pairs, lifting dishes with practiced grace. They murmur thanks and disappear into the corridor, bearing with them the colors, scents, and textures of the feast. The kitchen quiets. The fire hisses. A log falls, sending a flicker of sparks upward. Elspeth leans against the table and exhales. Her arms ache pleasantly, her hair damp beneath her cap. She pours herself a small cup of spiced cider, warm and sweet, and sits on the low stool by the hearth. The feast is not just food. It is tradition, community, and honor. A Tudor kitchen, humble and hidden, is the beating heart of the house. Outside, the sun begins to dip beyond the trees, casting long shadows across the flagstone floor. Elspeth closes her eyes for a moment, listening to the crackling of the fire and the quiet clatter of dishes beyond the door. Another day in the kitchen. Another feast prepared with care. Another memory baked into the walls of this ancient, breathing place. And in the stillness, you too feel it, the soft lull of time slowing, the comfort of warm bread and flickering light, the gentle silence of a job well done. Sleep, now, as the Tudor night falls. The morning is still, wrapped in a cool mist that settles softly over the Tudor estate like a silken veil. Inside the old kitchen, the hearth is slow to wake. A single flame flickers in the ash, stretching upward like a dancer, delicate and sure. Elspeth walks through the door, rubbing her hands gently together. Today, the kitchen feels quieter, no great feasts to prepare, no bustling footmen or echoing orders. It is a day for smaller things, quieter tasks, and whispered rituals. And in the corner of the pantry, beneath a heavy beam and behind a linen curtain, rests one of the kitchen's most precious treasures, the spice chest. She approaches it like one might approach a sacred relic. The chest is small, dark with age, its hinges worn but sturdy. It holds secrets from distant lands, wrapped in parchment, sealed in wax, and labeled with ink from decades past. Elspeth unties the latch and lifts the lid. A subtle bouquet escapes. A mingling of cinnamon, dried orange peel, clove, and something sharper, more elusive. Mace, perhaps, or the delicate whisper of saffron. Each compartment within the chest is lined with velvet and divided with care. Tiny boxes, some carved from bone, others from ivory or dark wood, nestle beside ceramic pots sealed with beeswax. Some are labeled in Latin, others in plain Tudor script. She runs her fingers across each one gently, like a librarian touching the spine of a beloved book. She lifts the lid of a tiny brass container. Inside, a fine red powder glows, saffron, plucked from crocus flowers, each strand once dried by hand in the warm sun of Spain or beyond. It is said to be worth more than its weight in gold. She pinches a few threads between her fingers and smiles. Next, she uncorks a pot of cloves. Their scent is warm, woody, and bold. She remembers grinding them into the wine sauce for last night's boar and the way the aroma rose like incense above the stew. She takes out a small box carved with a rose on its lid. Inside are thin, pale shavings of cinnamon bark, curled like scrolls. Not the coarser local kind, but true cinnamon from Ceylon, brought over sea and mountain by merchant caravans and ships. Then comes the jar of nutmeg, each nut whole and round, like polished seeds of the earth. She cracks one gently with a pestle and inhales the sweetness, nutty, spicy, almost floral. In Tudor kitchens, nutmeg is used not only in tarts and sauces, but also to scent linen and sweeten wine. These spices are stories, Elspeth thinks. Stories from afar, written in scent and flavor. Each one passed from hand to hand, across borders, deserts, oceans. They carry not only taste but memory, and in their presence, the world feels both vast and intimate. She recalls her training, long ago. How Mistress Agnes, the old cook, had taught her to handle these spices with reverence. They are not for the careless, she would say. One pinch too much, and you ruin a custard. One moment of neglect, and you scorch what was meant to be subtle. And so Elspeth learned, balance, proportion, grace. She gathers a few spices now for the task at hand, ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a shard of dried lemon peel. Today, she will make a spiced wine syrup, something to keep through the cooler nights ahead. A comfort in a cup. A warmth for the soul. She carries the ingredients back to the prep table and begins her ritual. A pan of red wine is poured, rich and dark like velvet. She adds a spoonful of honey, then drops in the ginger and cinnamon. The scent rises slowly, heady and soft, like an old lullaby. She crushes the nutmeg gently, grating just enough to perfume, not overpower. The lemon peel curls as it heats, releasing oils that shimmer across the wine's surface. The fire snaps. The room grows warm. Elspeth stirs slowly, breathing in the evolving scent. It is a quiet alchemy, not loud like feasts or fiery roasts, but something deeper. A brewing of memory, comfort, and time. As the syrup thickens, she prepares a few spice packets, small bundles wrapped in cheesecloth, tied with kitchen twine. Each holds a mixture ready for future dishes, a sweet one for custards, a savory one for stews, a sharp blend for baked pears. She sets them carefully in a wooden drawer lined with linen and lavender buds. They will rest there, waiting, until the right moment calls them forth. Outside, a light rain begins to fall, soft and rhythmic, like the tapping of gentle fingers on the roof. The world is quiet, and the kitchen hums with its own steady heart. Elspeth ladles the finished syrup into a tall, green bottle. She corks it tightly and labels it in her careful hand. Clove wine syrup, for winter nights. She places it beside a row of preserved fruits and spiced jams on the pantry shelf. Then she returns to the spice chest. Before closing it, she lingers a moment, touching one last item, a tiny pouch of black pepper, rare and precious. She remembers hearing stories that pepper was once used to pay rent, so valuable was its bite and flavor. With a slow hand, she shuts the lid, ties the latch, and lets the silence return. The kitchen grows still again. In the fading candlelight, the spice chest seems to glow faintly, its presence both ordinary and sacred. Elspeth sits beside the hearth, a warm mug of wine syrup in her hands. She sips slowly. The taste is rich, smooth, and comforting, like the memory of a dream. Outside, the rain continues to fall. Inside, the heart of the Tudor kitchen beats gently, full of secrets, spices, and stories softly whispered in the steam. Let that warmth carry you now, into rest. Into dreams. Morning light drifts in through the diamond-paned windows, golden and quiet. A gentle hush blankets the Tudor kitchen, still wrapped in the cool breath of dawn. Outside, the garden wears a sheen of dew, and the first birdsong dances faintly on the air. Inside, the great hearth is newly stoked, the first flickers of flame licking at the kindling laid the night before. Elspeth ties her linen apron, the folds still scented faintly of rosemary and flower, and reaches for her wooden paddle. Today is baking day, a ritual as old as the house itself. The large Tudor bread oven, bricked deep into the far wall, is the centerpiece of today's labor. Shaped like a great domed belly, its stones once laid by hand and seasoned over generations, it has seen centuries of loaves. Its heat is patient, powerful, and, if treated well, forgiving. The baker's round is not a single loaf, but a procession. A sequence of doughs, risen at their own pace, shaped by hand, and baked in an order dictated not by haste but by quiet rhythm. Elspeth begins by opening the wooden proofing drawers. Inside, the dough from the night before has risen slowly, tucked beneath flour-dusted cloths. It smells faintly of yeast and salt, with a soft tang from the ale starter used to ferment it. She presses a finger gently into its surface, it sighs beneath the pressure, then returns, alive and elastic. She tips the dough onto the scrubbed wooden table and begins to knead, slowly and with care. Her hands move in practiced circles, stretch, fold, press. The dough is warm from within, its texture silky and strong. Outside the window, the sun climbs gently through the mist. The first loaf is manchet, a fine white bread made with sifted flour, a luxury in Tudor kitchens. It is to be shaped carefully into rounds, each one rolled with a gentle firmness and dusted lightly before being scored with a cross. She sets them aside beneath linen and turns to the second dough, darker and richer. This one is maslin, a bread of mixed grains, coarse and earthy. It is made for the workers and kitchen staff, hearty and sustaining. She forms them into oval loaves, notched along the top to allow steam to escape. And finally, she prepares a batch of spiced buns, sweetened with honey and flecked with dried currants soaked in cider overnight. A touch of cinnamon and nutmeg turns the kitchen fragrant as she shapes them into round, plump domes and lines them on a greased iron tray. Once the loaves are shaped, Elspeth steps to the hearth. With a long-handled oven rake, she pulls the embers from the belly of the oven and sweeps out the ash. The residual heat remains locked in the stone, hot enough to crisp a crust, yet gentle enough to bake without burning. The first loaves to go in are the manchets. She slides them carefully onto the oven's floor, closing the heavy wooden door with a soft thunk. As they bake, the scent deepens, flour and fire, salt and rising heat. While they cook, Elspeth prepares the bread basket, woven willow, lined with clean linen. A sprig of bay leaves is tucked in the side, a simple touch that brings a subtle scent of the kitchen garden into every delivery. Time drifts gently. The manchets emerge, golden and light, their crusts just cracking. She sets them on the cooling rack by the open window, where the morning breeze cools their steam. Next go the maslin loaves, heavier, darker. And finally, the sweet buns, their sugar syrup brushed on as they bake, giving them a glossy sheen. Elspeth steps back to admire the round. A gentle smile tugs at her lips. It is more than food, it is a ritual, a rhythm tied to the beating heart of this old house. Bread is memory, sustenance, labor, and peace. It is history in the palm of the hand. She selects the finest loaves, placing them in the basket, 2 manchets, 2 maslins, and 6 honeyed buns. She covers them with a warm cloth and lifts the basket with practiced ease. Outside, the mist has lifted. The sun spills down across the garden path. She walks slowly toward the main house, her shoes crunching on gravel, her basket warm against her hip. At the servant's entrance, she sets the bread on the table. A maid thanks her with a smile, and Elspeth nods gently, already turning back toward the kitchen. The scent of baking still lingers when she returns. She makes herself a small cup of ale-barm broth, light and restorative, and sits by the window. On the table before her, a single manchet rests, cracked open, steam rising from its pillowy heart. She spreads a bit of soft cheese, fresh from the dairy, and places a sprig of thyme on top. A bite. Warm. Quiet. Nourishing. Outside, the breeze moves gently through the trees. Inside, the oven rests, its heat slowly fading back into stone. Another baker's round completed. Another morning of peace and flour and fire. The rhythm of the kitchen continues. And as Elspeth sits in the quiet, the bread warm in her hand, you too may feel that rhythm. The heartbeat of an old world. A slower time. Let it lull you now. Breathe gently. Close your eyes. Sleep. The air is thick with the scent of ripened fruit. A gentle golden light floods through the open shutters, and the Tudor kitchen feels almost sleepy in the heat of the early afternoon. Bees drone lazily outside near the lavender, and from the garden comes the faint rustle of leaves stirred by a summer breeze. Today is a day of sweetness and patience. Elspeth stands near the long wooden table, a broad shallow basket in her arms. Inside, plums, cherries, gooseberries, and currants, all gathered from the orchard and hedge rows that wind along the edge of the estate. Their colors are rich and deep, from ruby red to dusky purple, soft green to golden amber. She sets the basket down gently. In the quiet stillness of the kitchen, she begins sorting the fruit. Each berry is handled tenderly, checked for bruises or spots, and laid in wide ceramic bowls. Plums are washed in a basin of cool water and placed in a linen-lined tray to dry. Cherries are stemmed and pitted, their sweet scent filling the air. Preserving fruit is no hurried task, it is a ritual of time, fire, and care. It is a way of stretching summer far into winter, of holding the sun in jars for colder days to come. She begins with the gooseberries, simmering them slowly with a spoonful of honey and a splash of cider vinegar in a heavy copper pan. The heat rises gently, and the fruit bursts open, releasing a soft, tart fragrance. She stirs with a wooden spoon, the bubbling mixture thickening under her watchful eye. Next, the plum conserve, dark fruit sliced into quarters, cooked with clove and cinnamon, their skins dissolving into a velvety jam. As she stirs, she hums softly, an old song passed down from her grandmother's kitchen, where such preserves were once made by candlelight. To her left, a row of glass jars stands ready, their edges gleaming in the sunlight. Each one has been cleaned and warmed on the hearth to prevent cracking. Elspeth ladles the hot preserve into the first jar, the rich plum mixture sliding in with a comforting plop. A square of oiled parchment is pressed over the top, followed by a tightly tied cloth. The currants are next, bright red, tiny, and tart. She blends them with sweet apples, slowly coaxing out their juice, which glows like garnet. Into another pot they go, where sugar and lemon peel melt into the mixture until it thickens to the perfect consistency. The kitchen air is now sweet and heavy, rich with the scent of stewed fruit and warm spices. She takes a moment to open the back door. A soft breeze wafts in, carrying with it the scent of the herb garden, sage, mint, and thyme. The air cools her skin, and she takes a slow sip from a clay cup of spiced mead, refreshing and light. Outside, on a small wooden bench, she places the jars she's filled so far, letting the breeze help them cool. Bees hover nearby, curious but gentle. Then she returns to the stove for the last of the batches, the cherry conserve. Deep red and fragrant, this one is sweeter than the rest. A handful of lavender blossoms, dried in the pantry rafters, is crushed between her fingers and stirred in at the last moment, a secret touch she learned long ago. Each jar, when filled, is wiped carefully, labeled with chalk on a small slip of linen, and set with pride among the others. By the time the sun begins to dip in the sky, a full dozen jars sit in orderly rows, gleaming like treasure. Ruby, amethyst, topaz, garnet. These are not simply preserves. They are memories captured in sweetness. Each spoonful will carry with it the warmth of this summer day, the whisper of bees, the cool of stone under bare feet, the scent of herbs and slow fire. Elspeth tidies the space, wiping the table, rinsing bowls, folding the spent cloths. The kitchen feels settled now, peaceful and rich with the day's labor. She lights a taper on the mantel and lets the warm flicker soften the edges of the growing dusk. She pours herself a small bowl of curd cheese and spreads a spoonful of currant preserve on top, savoring each bite as she leans near the window. Outside, the orchard is still, cast in amber light. The leaves shimmer faintly, and a single robin hops along the garden wall. In the pantry, the jars will rest for weeks, months, even, lined up like silent guardians of the season. On cold winter mornings, when the hearth groans and snow piles at the sill, one of these jars will be opened, and the kitchen will once again taste of summer. The fire crackles gently as the light fades. You imagine the jars, warm and glowing, lined along a wooden shelf in a quiet corner. You picture the soft bubbling of fruit in a copper pan, the careful hands stirring, tasting, preserving. All is still now. Let the warmth of summer fruit and the slow rhythm of the Tudor kitchen lull you into stillness. Let the fragrance of plums and lavender, of wood smoke and sweet syrup, drift into your dreams. Close your eyes. Breathe softly. Sleep. Then she returns to the stove for the last of the batches, the cherry conserve. Deep red and fragrant, this one is sweeter than the rest. A handful of lavender blossoms, dried in the pantry rafters, is crushed between her fingers and stirred in at the last moment, a secret touch she learned long ago. Each jar, when filled, is wiped carefully, labeled with chalk on a small slip of linen, and set with pride among the others. By the time the sun begins to dip in the sky, a full dozen jars sit in orderly rows, gleaming like treasure. Ruby, amethyst, topaz, garnet. These are not simply preserves. They are memories captured in sweetness. Each spoonful will carry with it the warmth of this summer day, the whisper of bees, the cool of stone under bare feet, the scent of herbs and slow fire. Elspeth tidies the space, wiping the table, rinsing bowls, folding the spent cloths. The kitchen feels settled now, peaceful and rich with the day's labor. She lights a taper on the mantel and lets the warm flicker soften the edges of the growing dusk. She pours herself a small bowl of curd cheese and spreads a spoonful of currant preserve on top, savoring each bite as she leans near the window. Outside, the orchard is still, cast in amber light. The leaves shimmer faintly, and a single robin hops along the garden wall. In the pantry, the jars will rest for weeks, months, even, lined up like silent guardians of the season. On cold winter mornings, when the hearth groans and snow piles at the sill, one of these jars will be opened, and the kitchen will once again taste of summer. The fire crackles gently as the light fades. You imagine the jars, warm and glowing, lined along a wooden shelf in a quiet corner. You picture the soft bubbling of fruit in a copper pan, the careful hands stirring, tasting, preserving. All is still now. Let the warmth of summer fruit and the slow rhythm of the Tudor kitchen lull you into stillness. Let the fragrance of plums and lavender, of wood smoke and sweet syrup, drift into your dreams. Close your eyes. Breathe softly. Sleep. The air in the Tudor countryside has begun to shift. The warmth of summer lingers, but a crispness hums beneath the breeze, a gentle whisper that autumn is near. In the early morning, dew clings longer to the grass, and the garden takes on deeper hues of gold and russet. Inside the kitchen, Elspeth stands with her hands wrapped around a cup of steeped barley tea, its mild warmth rising in soft spirals. The windows are open, letting in the scent of damp soil and ripe fruit. Today is the beginning of the first harvest, and preparations must be made, not only for the pantry shelves above but for the root cellar below. Down in the shaded coolness of the stone-walled cellar, the air smells of earth and thyme. It is dark and damp, perfect for storing what must last through the winter months ahead. Elspeth lights a small beeswax candle, and its glow flickers softly over the rough walls and arched ceiling. She moves carefully, checking the wooden shelves and the baskets woven from willow. The stone floor is clean, and the barrels are in place, one for turnips, another for carrots, others for potatoes, onions, and parsnips. A thick cloth covers each one to keep out the light, helping them stay firm and full of life through the coldest months. Back in the upper kitchen, the bustle begins gently. Elspeth has risen early to begin sorting and scrubbing the root vegetables brought in from the garden. She lays them across the table in neat rows, dusty potatoes in shades of tan and red, long pale parsnips with feathery green tops, onions with their papery skins still intact, and carrots the color of autumn leaves. She hums as she works, an old harvest tune her mother once sang. With a damp cloth, she wipes each vegetable clean, not washing them fully, just enough to remove the soil that clings too tightly. Washing too thoroughly might invite spoilage, and she knows better than to tempt time. Each item is inspected for bruises or blemishes, and anything imperfect is set aside for cooking within the week. The rest are sorted into shallow baskets lined with straw, carefully arranged by kind, and carried one by one down the narrow stone steps to the cellar. In the cool darkness, she places each basket gently onto its shelf. The carrots are nestled beside bunches of drying sage, the onions stacked in rope-tied clusters, ready to hang from the ceiling beams. A small jar of cloves and bay leaves is placed nearby, not just for scent, but to gently deter pests with their rich, earthy aroma. She pauses a moment, letting the silence of the cellar settle around her. It is not empty down here, it is quietly full, like a deep breath held in the chest. There's a comfort in knowing what lies beneath the house, stores of sustenance, the effort of seasons, the patience of preparation. The air in the Tudor countryside has begun to shift. The warmth of summer lingers, but a crispness hums beneath the breeze, a gentle whisper that autumn is near. In the early morning, dew clings longer to the grass, and the garden takes on deeper hues of gold and russet. Inside the kitchen, Elspeth stands with her hands wrapped around a cup of steeped barley tea, its mild warmth rising in soft spirals. The windows are open, letting in the scent of damp soil and ripe fruit. Today is the beginning of the first harvest, and preparations must be made, not only for the pantry shelves above but for the root cellar below. Down in the shaded coolness of the stone-walled cellar, the air smells of earth and thyme. It is dark and damp, perfect for storing what must last through the winter months ahead. Elspeth lights a small beeswax candle, and its glow flickers softly over the rough walls and arched ceiling. She moves carefully, checking the wooden shelves and the baskets woven from willow. The stone floor is clean, and the barrels are in place, one for turnips, another for carrots, others for potatoes, onions, and parsnips. A thick cloth covers each one to keep out the light, helping them stay firm and full of life through the coldest months. Back in the upper kitchen, the bustle begins gently. Elspeth has risen early to begin sorting and scrubbing the root vegetables brought in from the garden. She lays them across the table in neat rows, dusty potatoes in shades of tan and red, long pale parsnips with feathery green tops, onions with their papery skins still intact, and carrots the color of autumn leaves. She hums as she works, an old harvest tune her mother once sang. With a damp cloth, she wipes each vegetable clean, not washing them fully, just enough to remove the soil that clings too tightly. Washing too thoroughly might invite spoilage, and she knows better than to tempt time. Each item is inspected for bruises or blemishes, and anything imperfect is set aside for cooking within the week. The rest are sorted into shallow baskets lined with straw, carefully arranged by kind, and carried one by one down the narrow stone steps to the cellar. In the cool darkness, she places each basket gently onto its shelf. The carrots are nestled beside bunches of drying sage, the onions stacked in rope-tied clusters, ready to hang from the ceiling beams. A small jar of cloves and bay leaves is placed nearby, not just for scent, but to gently deter pests with their rich, earthy aroma. She pauses a moment, letting the silence of the cellar settle around her. It is not empty down here, it is quietly full, like a deep breath held in the chest. There's a comfort in knowing what lies beneath the house, stores of sustenance, the effort of seasons, the patience of preparation. The sun hangs lower in the sky, casting a gentle amber hue across the fields beyond the kitchen window. It is the end of September, and the air carries the first whisper of autumn, cool and crisp, tinged with wood smoke and fallen leaves. Inside the Tudor kitchen, the mood is calm, almost reverent, for Michaelmas is near, a time of celebration, feasting, and giving thanks for the harvest just gathered. Elspeth stands quietly at the wooden table, her hands resting on a soft linen cloth spread across the surface. Today will be a day of preparation, not of haste. She draws a deep breath, letting the stillness settle into her bones. This is the season of slow warmth, of gratitude made visible through cooking. The kitchen hums with soft activity. Herbs, sage, thyme, rosemary, hang in bundles above the hearth, drying for winter use. A basket of apples sits beside a jug of pear cider. On the table, she spreads out ingredients gathered from both field and pantry. Quince, onions, leeks, barley, dried fruits, and salted meat. Michaelmas marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of darker days. In Tudor times, it was not only a religious festival but a practical dividing line in the calendar. Rents were due, contracts ended or renewed, and goose was often eaten to mark prosperity and good fortune. But in Elspeth's kitchen, the focus is on warmth, a feast by candlelight, shared with family and neighbors alike. She begins by preparing the Michaelmas goose, which rests on a wooden board, its skin already cleaned and ready. From a small jar, she scoops a mixture of salt, crushed juniper berries, ground pepper, and wild thyme, rubbing it gently across the skin. Into the cavity, she places apples, onions, and a handful of sage, tucking them in like secrets. Beside the hearth, she sets a large spit over the fire. The goose will roast slowly for hours, turning gently on iron hooks. The scent, earthy, rich, and deep, will slowly fill the home and drift through the air like a memory of other feasts. While the goose begins its long roasting, Elspeth turns to the side dishes. First, a thick barley pottage, simmered in a clay pot. She stirs in bits of leek, carrot, and leftover mutton, letting it bubble quietly. The barley softens, absorbing the broth, thickening the mixture into a comforting stew. In another pan, she begins the quince tart. Sliced quince, firm and golden, is layered into a pastry shell, sprinkled with sugar and cinnamon. A little butter melts across the top as it bakes near the edge of the fire, crust slowly crisping to a gentle brown. On a wooden tray, she arranges cheese, hazelnuts, dried figs, and wedges of dark, crusty bread made just days before. This tray will sit on the table during the feast, offering bites between dishes, simple, sustaining, and seasonally made. From a tall jug, she pours honeyed ale into ceramic cups and places them aside, allowing the flavors to mellow slightly before the guests arrive. A soft clove note rises from the cups as the warmth of the kitchen touches the liquid. Outside, the sky begins to turn toward evening. The light shifts from gold to rose, then to violet. Elspeth moves through the kitchen with quiet steps, placing candles into iron sconces on the walls, lighting them one by one. The flames flicker gently, casting shadows across the room, making the old wood glow like amber. The goose now glistens, its skin darkened and crisp. Fat sizzles as it drips into the tray below, mingling with apple juices and herbs. Elspeth checks it carefully, turning it once more before adding one last brush of melted butter mixed with thyme. She sets the table in the main hall, plain linen, hand-carved wooden plates, pewter cups. A simple garland of ivy and hawthorn berries winds through the center, placed there by the children earlier that afternoon. On each plate rests a small piece of folded parchment, a blessing written in charcoal script. Thanks for the harvest, peace for the hearth. Guests begin to arrive just as the final candle is lit. Cloaks are hung, cheeks are kissed, and boots are set by the fire. Laughter and low voices rise, soft as wool, as friends and kin gather in the warmth of the home. Elspeth places the goose in the center of the table, its presence alone enough to quiet the room. Around it, she sets the barley stew, the tart, the cheese, the bread, and the nuts. The feast is humble, yet abundant. There is no excess, only care. Before they eat, the room pauses. Heads bow. A quiet grace is spoken, not in Latin, but in the old way, simple and sincere. Gratitude for the sun, for the soil, for the work of hands and the rest of sleep. And then they eat. The meal stretches long into the night. The fire crackles. The candles burn low. Children curl beside each other on woven rugs. Stories are shared. Old songs are hummed. Time slows, softens, fades into silence. When the last guest leaves and the final ember glows, Elspeth returns to the kitchen. She cleans quietly, one dish at a time, her heart full and light. The window shows only darkness now, and the air is cold. But inside, there is bread. There is fire. And there is peace. Michaelmas has come and gone. The season now turns toward frost. But this night, this feast, this moment, will remain warm in memory, wrapped in the scent of roast goose and candle wax. Let your breath settle like mist over the fields. Let your thoughts wander down quiet lanes lit by lanterns. You are home. And it is enough. Sleep now. The wind outside is beginning to change. It whistles gently through the eaves, whispering its arrival at the edge of the season. Summer has faded into memory, and now autumn deepens, folding its russet arms around the Tudor countryside. Inside the kitchen, the hearth glows softly. Elspeth kneels by the flames, placing another log onto the coals. The light flickers upward, warming the stones and timber, bringing golden life to the shadows that creep into corners at this time of year. Today is not for cooking grand meals or hosting feasts. Today is for tending to the quiet work, the slow, thoughtful rituals of preservation. For with winter on the horizon, every leaf, root, and seed must be cared for with intention. Elspeth turns to the table where bunches of herbs lie in carefully bound bundles: sage, marjoram, lavender, mint, rosemary, yarrow, and hyssop. Each has been gathered at the right time, under the right moon, dried just enough to hold their oils, but not so much that they crumble at the touch. She begins by inspecting each bunch. Her fingers move lightly, brushing over the leaves with a gentle reverence. These herbs are not just flavor, they are medicine, memory, and magic. They will line shelves, fill sachets, and be stirred into teas through the long, dark nights ahead. Above the hearth, wooden rods stretch across the ceiling beams. It is here Elspeth will hang the bundles to finish drying. One by one, she lifts them by their stems and ties each to the beam with soft twine. The scents begin to mingle: sharp rosemary, sweet mint, the woody perfume of sage. The air becomes a gentle fog of aroma, soothing and nostalgic. Each breath draws in the scent of gardens long past and meadows kissed by the late summer sun. Elspeth hums as she works. It is a tune passed down through her grandmother's line, a lullaby more felt than remembered. Her voice does not fill the room but lives within it, curling around the shelves and settling on the rafters like dust motes in candlelight. Next, she turns to her herb jars, clay and glass vessels, their tops sealed with wax and linen. These will store the more fragile herbs that have already dried: lemon balm, elderflower, and violet petals, too delicate to be hung overhead. She pours each into its jar slowly, funneling them in with care. The petals rustle like pages turning in an old book. She presses a circle of linen over each mouth and seals them with string, labeling each one with charcoal ink and the date of collection. These jars will sit in the cool corner cupboard, away from the fire. And in the cold months to come, when coughs rise and spirits fall, she will unseal them one by one, releasing their scent and brewing comfort into each cup. A small iron pot now rests over the hearth, filled with warm water. Into it, Elspeth drops a few sprigs of chamomile and valerian, preparing a tonic for rest. She lets it steep while she moves about the kitchen, gathering small linen pouches for the next task, making herb sachets for pillows and drawers. She fills each pouch with dried lavender, rose petals, and crushed mint leaves. These sachets will scent the bedsheets, keeping away moths and welcoming sleep. She stitches each one closed with a practiced hand, humming again as the needle slips through the fabric. Beyond the kitchen window, the sun has vanished, leaving only a smudge of silver light behind the hills. The first stars blink above the treetops, and the garden outside rustles as creatures settle in for the night. Elspeth pauses at the windowsill, holding a steaming mug of the herbal tea she's just brewed. She sips it slowly, the bitter valerian softened by the floral chamomile. The warmth spreads down her throat, settling into her chest like the first layer of a blanket. She remembers her mother standing just here, years ago, drying herbs by the fire. Her hands, younger then than Elspeth's are now, moved with the same calm, the same certainty. The rhythm of it connects them, generation to generation, through seasons and stillness. From a shelf, she takes a small book, her own herbal journal. Its pages are filled with careful sketches of leaves and blooms, notations of planting dates, harvest times, and medicinal uses. She sits by the fire and adds today's entries, how the marjoram grew sweeter this year, how the yarrow held its shape better in the shade. It is a quiet joy, this keeping of records. A conversation with nature across time. She smiles softly to herself, feeling the pulse of the past and the promise of tomorrow woven together in these pages. The fire crackles low now. The room is dim, lit only by the flickering flames and a single candle on the table. Elspeth gathers the remaining herbs and stores them away, sliding the cupboard door shut with a soft creak. Everything is in its place, ready for winter, ready for healing. She rises and blows out the candle. A trail of smoke curls into the air, joining the lingering perfume of rosemary and thyme. The room grows still. Her footsteps are muffled by the thick wool rug as she walks toward the door. Just before she leaves, she turns back one last time. The kitchen holds the faint glow of embers, the scent of the garden captured in threads and jars. It is enough. The herbs are hanging. The cupboards are full. The season is changing. And tonight, the world is wrapped in quiet. Let the fire keep you warm. Let the herbs soothe your breath. Let sleep come slowly, gently, like the rustle of dried leaves. All is well. The kitchen is still. A hush lies over the wooden beams and stone walls, like the soft settling of flour onto a tabletop. The morning has not yet fully bloomed, and outside, the mists cling low over the fields. Birds are just beginning to stir in the hedgerows, their calls muffled by the fog. Within, the air is gentle, cool, calm, and waiting. Elspeth moves slowly through the kitchen. There is no hurry today. Her hands are covered in a dusting of flour, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, and her apron tied snugly around her waist. She lifts the linen cloth from the bowl on the table, revealing the dough beneath. It is sourdough, though no one here calls it that. It is simply the bread that waits, the bread that takes time, the bread that listens to the air, the warmth of the hearth, and the rhythm of life. The starter was fed last night, just before the fire was banked. It lives in a small clay pot near the hearth, warm and quietly bubbling with life. Elspeth has kept it for years. Passed down from her mother, who tended it before her. It is more than yeast and flour. It is a living memory, a pulse of the past in every rise. She presses her fingers into the dough. It springs back gently, alive and ready. The wooden board is dusted. Elspeth lifts the dough and begins to knead, not with force, but with patience. Her palms press and fold, turn and stretch, over and over in a slow, meditative rhythm. The only sound is the soft thump of dough against board and the distant sigh of the fire catching again. The kitchen smells faintly of the earth, flour, water, and smoke. It is a scent that cannot be bottled or hurried. It belongs to days like this. Days of shaping, resting, and waiting. When the dough is smooth and elastic, she rounds it into a ball and places it in a woven basket lined with linen. Another cloth is draped gently over the top, and it is set aside on a warm shelf near the hearth. The bread must rise. And so, she waits. There is no timer. No clock ticking on the wall. Time is felt in the way the dough breathes and grows, in the shadows that shift on the floor, in the tilt of sunlight through the diamond-paned windows. While it rests, Elspeth moves through her other morning tasks. She sweeps flour from the tabletop with a bundle of dried lavender stems, the scent rising with each stroke. She tends the hearth, feeding it a small log, watching the flames curl and flicker. She brews tea from the herbs dried just days ago, thyme and marjoram, with a pinch of mint, and sips it slowly while she watches the dough. Outside, the mist has lifted just slightly. A shaft of light breaks through the gray, falling softly across the garden. Birds gather at the sill, pecking at crumbs left for them. Elspeth smiles and tosses a few more from her pocket. Time passes like a stream, quiet, steady, never still. When she returns to the dough, it has risen. Its smooth surface is now domed and soft, dimpled where it has stretched and sighed. She touches it with reverence, her fingers light, as though waking a sleeping child. She turns it out again onto the board, shaping it with practiced hands. She does not weigh it or measure, her hands know what is needed. She tucks and folds, rounds the loaf once more, then places it gently into the banneton, the final resting place before the oven. The fire is ready. She pushes aside the iron kettle, rakes the coals to one side, and slips a small earthenware baking cloche into the embers to warm. The air in the kitchen thickens with anticipation, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath. When the cloche is hot, Elspeth carefully lifts the lid, dusts the inside with a handful of flour, and lowers the dough into it. She scores the top with a blade, just a shallow cut in the shape of a leaf, and places the lid back on. The cloche is returned to the hearth, nestled into the coals. It will bake slowly, surrounded by fire on all sides, as it has for generations. And now, the waiting begins again. Elspeth sits in her chair near the fire, the tea still warm in her hands, and watches the glow of the cloche. From time to time, a soft pop or crackle rises from the hearthstones, but the bread is silent. Its transformation is quiet. She remembers mornings just like this when she was a girl, sitting by the fire while her mother baked. The smell of the bread would fill the house, winding through corridors and curling beneath doors, waking everyone before a word was spoken. It was the aroma of care, not just food, but comfort. Soon, it begins. The scent rises slowly, rich and golden. The crust crackles gently as it forms. The kitchen becomes warm not just with fire, but with something deeper. A sense of peace, of provision, of quiet pride. After nearly an hour, she lifts the lid. The bread has risen into a full, proud dome. The crust is browned and dusted with flour, the scored leaf now a beautiful split down the top. She taps it gently, it sings with a hollow note, like a drum of earth and fire. She sets it on a board to cool, and the crust begins to whisper, tiny crackles and shifts as it settles, releasing steam in delicate sighs. Elspeth does not cut into it yet. Bread must rest. Like all things in the Tudor kitchen, it follows a rhythm of its own, a pace of patience, of reverence. She returns to her chair, the cooling loaf on the table beside her. The candle has burned low. Outside, the fog has cleared. The world is awake, but in here, everything moves at the pace of bread. Slow. Steady. Sacred. Let this rhythm guide you tonight. Let the breath of rising dough and the hush of kneading hands lull you. Let the scent of baked crust and the softness of morning light wrap around you. The bread has waited. And so can we. All is quiet now. The sun has begun its slow descent beyond the woods and hedgerows, casting long golden fingers across the kitchen floor. The light, filtered through the diamond panes of leaded glass, paints soft amber patterns on the worn stones beneath the table. This is the hour the Tudor kitchen breathes deepest, not in the frenzy of the morning bread, nor the bustle of noontime stews. This is the time of embers, of soft orange heat and gentle preparations. The pace has slowed, and the fire, now lower and mellow, is ready for the evening's simplest offerings. Elspeth sits quietly for a moment, just listening. The fire crackles gently in the hearth, no longer roaring but humming like an old friend telling stories. The coals glow a deep red, like the heart of the earth laid bare. It is the perfect fire for roasting roots, those humble gifts pulled from the soil, brushed clean, and placed in the heat to transform into sweetness. She rises, tying her woolen shawl around her shoulders. The kitchen is not cold, but the evening air that creeps through the stone feels different from the morning chill, quieter, thoughtful, like a lullaby. On the table rests a basket, gathered earlier in the day from the garden and the root cellar. It holds carrots, parsnips, small turnips, and red onions with their papery skins. A few apples have joined them too, slightly wrinkled, their fragrance still sharp and clean. She lifts each root with care. There is something reverent about vegetables grown with one's own hands. Each is different, twisted, ridged, knotted in places, but each is beautiful in its honesty. She brushes the last of the soil from their skins, not scrubbing too hard. A bit of earth never hurt anyone. At the long oak table, she slices and quarters slowly. The knife moves with a rhythm that matches her breath: carrot, turnip, onion, apple. Each falls into the old iron roasting pan with a soft thud. A few sprigs of sage and rosemary, dried from the summer garden, are crumbled gently over the top. Elspeth drizzles the mixture with oil, not olive oil, but rapeseed, pressed from the local mill. A pinch of salt, a scattering of black pepper, and she mixes it all with her hands, letting the oil coat each surface. The scent is already rising, earthy, sharp, and sweet. The pan is placed directly onto the iron trivet set just above the embers. The roots will roast slowly, turned once or twice, until their edges darken and their hearts turn soft. While they cook, she tends to the kitchen in small, quiet gestures. She folds the towels that hang near the hearth. She checks the herb bundles strung from the ceiling beams: lavender, thyme, bay leaves, some already dry enough to crumble into jars. She writes slowly in her little recipe book, though no measurements are included, only memories. Outside, the sky shifts from gold to dusky rose. The birds are still, the wind light. It is a time of letting go, of the light, of the day's work, of thoughts that no longer need to be carried. The roots begin to shift in the pan. She hears it before she sees it, a sizzle, a hiss, a soft bubble as the oil catches and the sugars begin to caramelize. Elspeth leans in and gently turns them with a long-handled spoon, the edges already crisping, the onions melting into the pan like silk. A few cloves of garlic are added, unpeeled, just cracked slightly so the heat can reach within. Their aroma will bloom as they roast, turning mellow and golden. The warmth from the fire radiates outward, wrapping around her legs like a familiar blanket. This is the kitchen's final gift of the day, a slow, radiant goodbye. The candle on the sill is lit, its small flame flickering softly. The light dances on the stone walls, where shadows stretch like fingers and fold into corners. The kitchen seems to sigh with her, easing into the quiet. She checks the roots again. They are nearly ready. The carrots glisten, their edges dark and sweet. The turnips have softened, the apples collapsed into golden bites. She lifts a piece of onion with her fingers and tastes. It melts on her tongue, rich, smoky, just a touch of sweetness. Dinner tonight will be simple: roasted roots, a bit of bread left from the morning, and perhaps a wedge of cheese. No meat, no heavy sauce, just the fire's bounty, and the memory of sunlight still stored in each root. Elspeth spoons the vegetables into a warm clay bowl, the colors glowing even in the dim light. A final pinch of salt. A curl of butter. She sets the bowl on the table and pours herself a mug of cider, cool, golden, and faintly sharp with age. She does not rush the meal. The fire burns low. The candle flickers gently. The spoon moves slowly from bowl to mouth, and between each bite, she closes her eyes and listens, to the soft wind outside, to the crackle of the wood, to the rhythm of her own breath. In this moment, there is nothing but warmth, taste, and stillness. The embers begin to die down now, the last red threads curling into gray. She banks the fire with care, laying ash over the remaining coals so they might sleep through the night and wake again tomorrow. The roasting pan is washed and dried. The table cleared. The candle extinguished with a quiet sigh. Before she leaves, Elspeth stands in the doorway for a moment, looking back. The kitchen glows faintly in the last traces of firelight. It smells of roasted roots and herbs, of stone warmed by flame, and of days well spent. The hearth has settled into a quiet glow, its embers dim and drowsy beneath a veil of fine white ash. The Tudor kitchen no longer hums with motion. Its heartbeat is slower now, softer, like a lullaby in stone and timber. The night has fully fallen. Outside, the stars prick the velvet sky, sharp and silver. The breeze, faint as breath, rustles the thatch above. All the village is wrapped in stillness. Inside the kitchen, only a single candle burns low, its flame curled like a golden comma, casting flickers along the beams and cupboards. Elspeth moves gently, as if the kitchen itself were asleep and she dared not wake it. She carries a pail of lukewarm water to the wooden basin near the scullery wall. The water sloshes softly, catching the light. A folded linen cloth rests in her hand, coarse but well used, and she lowers it into the water with care. The cloth darkens, steam rising in a gentle spiral. This is the final task of the day. The quiet cleansing of the space, the small acts that show respect not only for the kitchen, but for the rhythm of time itself. She wrings the cloth, her hands practiced and slow, and begins with the long oak table. Crumbs from the evening's bread are brushed away, tiny specks of flour gathered into her palm. The damp cloth sweeps across the wood in wide, patient strokes, lifting the traces of chopping, kneading, seasoning. The table, like a dear companion, receives her attention in silence. Every mark, every grain in the wood, tells a story. She lingers over a small stain from yesterday's plum tart. She remembers the laughter when the filling bubbled over. Memories live in these surfaces, gentle reminders of joy, work, and care. The candle shifts in its puddle of wax, casting momentary shadows across the floor. Elspeth's movements echo softly now, her footfalls on stone, the distant creak of the wood above, the whisper of the cloth against surfaces long worn. She moves next to the shelves. Jars of preserved herbs, bottles of vinegar, bundles of dried beans, all carefully arranged, receive her touch as she dusts them one by one. Not hurriedly, not for display, but for order and peace. Above her, a bunch of lavender brushes the beam, its scent still strong, even in dry repose. She inhales it gently, closing her eyes. This kitchen is more than a place of food. It is a place of presence. She turns next to the hearth. The iron tools, poker, trivet, fire hook, are placed in order. The ashes are gently swept, the embers banked once more. The roasting pan, washed earlier, is now rubbed with a soft cloth and oiled lightly to keep it strong. It will serve her again tomorrow. Near the fireplace, she kneels and places a few sprigs of rosemary on the warm stones. The heat releases their scent, piney, sharp, cleansing, and the room breathes in it like incense in a chapel. The broom is the last companion of the night. It glides along the flagstones, its bristles gathering what the day has left behind, a stray onion peel, a pinch of dried herb, the ghost of flour on the wind. She sweeps slowly, almost ceremonially. With each pass, the floor becomes calmer, quieter, as if it too prepares to sleep. She gathers the leavings into a small pan and tosses them into the fire. The flame licks them briefly, then returns to stillness. The kitchen, now tended, glows in the candlelight like a painting. Elspeth leans against the wooden post for a moment. She watches the shadows sway across the floor. The room is so still that she can hear the slow creak of cooling iron and the distant night noises of the countryside, a barn owl's soft call, the creaking of branches, the rustle of a mouse in the thatch. This moment is hers alone. It is a moment few see. The world asleep, the chores finished, the air warm and scented. She reaches for a small pewter cup and pours herself the last of the spiced cider, now just barely warm. She drinks it slowly, the cinnamon and cloves lingering on her tongue like memories. Near the hearth, on the small stool, sits a well-worn book of receipts, recipes, yes, but also remedies, musings, even prayers. She flips through the pages, the ink faint in places. Her grandmother's hand, her mother's notes, her own scribbles filling the margins. In this kitchen, they are all still present. Not ghosts, not shadows, but gestures, habits, choices handed down like heirlooms. She closes the book gently and places it back on its shelf. The candle is almost gone now. Its light stutters, dances, and steadies once more. Elspeth begins her final walk through the space. She touches the handle of the pantry, now closed and stocked. She straightens a basket near the hearth. She folds the drying cloths that hang above the warm bricks. Each action says, "You are cared for. You are safe. You can rest now." At last, she returns to the candle. With a soft breath, she extinguishes it. Darkness swells gently through the kitchen, not a frightening darkness, but one that cradles. A darkness made warm by memory and ember. For a moment, the room is still. Then a breeze moves through the beamwork, and the ashes in the hearth whisper. Night has come completely. Elspeth turns, her footsteps quiet on the stone, and leaves the kitchen behind. The door closes with a muted thud, and silence settles like dust. But even in silence, the Tudor kitchen lives. It holds the warmth of the day, the scent of roasted roots, the music of ladles and spoons, the laughter of those who passed through. It holds centuries of nightfall. It is not empty. It dreams. And so may you. Let your thoughts soften, like flour stirred into butter. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the sleeping fire. Let your mind curl like smoke rising from embers. The kitchen is still. The night is deep. The story is told. Sleep now, in warmth and quiet. All is well.